Well, there's been quite a changing of the guard in London over the last 24 hours. The question, though, is, will they turn left? Will they turn right? Will they go forward? Or will they go back? Or perhaps a little bit of all of them. The Conservative Party, with ruthless efficiency, in just 19 or 20 days, has removed David Cameron, removed his right-hand man and finance minister, Chancellor of the Exchequer, the #2 job in Britain, George Osborne. He was so humiliated by his sacking, he had to sneak out the back door of Downing Street to avoid the waiting photographers. Over the last 24 hours, some of the biggest names in British politics have had their careers ended. Although, as some of the retreads, that is to say, ministers who were long ago sacked but have now come back, as they prove, sometimes in politics, there's life after death. Certainly Michael Gove, formerly a big figure round Westminster, now dismissed and bereft of all power and influence, he'll be hoping that he can come back. And he's a potential danger to Theresa May, because he's the most effective of the Brexiteers who has not been bought over by being given an important job in the government. And you know the old adage of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the former president of the United States: sometimes it's better to have people inside of the tent spitting out rather than outside of the tent spitting in. Well, you know exactly what I mean. What has been David Cameron's legacy? Well, there's no getting away from this. David Cameron will be remembered only for one thing, and David, it ain't going to be gay marriage. You'll be remembered only for one thing and one thing only. You promised a referendum on the membership of the European Union. You pretended for years that you were against the European Union. You pretended even in the few weeks that you were renegotiating Britain's terms. You pretended that you were ready to lead Britain out of the EU. You didn't have to have the referendum. You chose the time of the referendum. You put everything, even the kitchen sink, into winning that referendum by a scandalous and disgraceful campaign of falsification, and you lost. You see, treason never prospers, for if it prospers, no one dare call it treason. If you had done all this and you had won the referendum, nobody would have been talking about it for very long. But you did all that and you lost, and that's why you had to go. And now, at a young age, with a young and big family by British standards, David Cameron's looking for a job. Will he go down the path trodden by his predecessor, Tony Blair? Only time will tell. Will George Osborne, his finance minister, sacked? Will he get any jobs? I'm not sure any capitalist, still less a bank, will be prepared to give him a job. Luckily, he has a wallpaper shop that his father owned, which might provide him with a small stipend or two. David Cameron destroyed Libya. He tried to destroy Syria. He encouraged the forces of Takfiri fanaticism all over the world. And then he wondered why it all went so wrong. David Cameron, the man that took Britain against his will out of the European Union and who spread fire, war, and hatred across the world. Take a look at this on the video wall.
Your Your city was an inspiration to the world as you threw off a dictator and chose freedom.
أنا سعيد بكوني هنا.
People in Britain salute your courage, and while we are proud of the role that we played to help, we know this was your revolution from your bravery, from people in Benghazi, people in Tripoli, people in Zritan, people in Brega, people in Misrata. You showed the world you would get rid of a dictator and you would choose freedom.
I want a very clear message to go to President Assad that nothing is off the table, that further support, further work, further help with the opposition, who are now better formed, better organised, better coordinated, is robustly on the table.
As I was saying, it's all so embarrassing. There he was in Tripoli, ranting and raving at the crowd, red-faced and interesting, telling them that they had chosen democracy. Well, within days of him and little Sarkozy, the French president as was, within days, black men were hanging from the trees, twisting in the wind like strange fruit. Within days, these fanatics were murdering each other and anyone else they could get their hands on, including the American ambassador in the aforementioned Benghazi. They lynched the leader that they overthrew. They invited all these Western companies to come and loot them, steal from them, as long as they kicked some of it back to the political figures and organizations that were inviting the foreigners in. All kinds of grisly dictatorships in the Persian Gulf, for whom the word democracy is a swear word, were all in there fighting for Libyan democracy. Well, what's happened since? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, tribes. He ran through the cities. Tripoli, Benghazi, Misrata, Brega, Sirte. He went through them all. What he didn't say, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he's just a fool. He didn't say that they all had their own army and they had all founded their own Libya, their own government, their own group of gangsters. Libya today is worse than the gangs of New York. The Scorsese movie, which described unbridled, unpoliced, unpoliceable savagery as a means of settling disputes and struggles for power. That's Libya. And then you saw Cameron talking about the Syrian opposition, better formed, he said, better armed, better organized, all the better to eat your heart with, all the better to cut your head off with, all the better to destroy your church or your mosque, to destroy your tomb and kick around the bones even of the holiest of figures. Well, that's David Cameron.